so I'm not as prepared as I would like to be this morning. There's a lot to do, but I think I still will be able to choke out what is the most important content that's here. So what I've done is I passed out the translation that I have produced from Isaiah chapter 3, verse 21, down to Isaiah chapter 4, verse 1. I do believe that chapter 4, verse 1 belongs with chapter 3, and that chapter 4, verse 2 should be a part of the remainder of chapter 4. Now in chapter 4, verse 2, we have a change of theme where he begins to talk about what I believe is the Messiah. And so next week, I'll be talking about that, which I'm really excited about because I prefer to talk more about something like that than what I have to talk about today. Because today, I mean, what am I supposed to do with this? Where it says in verse 1, chapter 4, verse 1, and 7 women will be looking for one man. You know, I mean, this is almost as bad as the verse previously that I had to speak on previously, which was that the women will be ruling instead of the men. I mean, that was a tough one, wasn't it? You know, it's hard to do that, especially in our modern culture where people can have different attitudes concerning these things and have attitudes towards me also. So this is really hard to do. Because, you know, some guys, and I'm not saying anybody here, but I have known some guys who would probably read something like this, and they would say, yes, victory at last, 7 wives. You know, there are men like that, and there might be women who might say, yes, victory at last, I can have 6 others who can gang up on my one husband with me. Maybe, you know, I don't think any of you would be like that, but, you know, I'm just saying that there are people who have different attitudes concerning this, and they look at it in a positive light or a negative light, depending upon how they view it. I'm going to tell you something today you probably would not have considered, and so please have patience with me about this, that I'm going to tell you about a different view of this, that it's not about victory at last or anything like that, but it really describes a condition of decay. It really does. Decay in the society, and it really says something, I believe it does say something negative about those ladies, and it says something negative about the men who would be willing to take on that many wives like that. You know, sometimes I do get questions about this just because it's in the scriptures a lot. I mean, you read through the scriptures and you see that there are people who there are men who have more than one wife. And there's all kinds of questions that can be raised by that. You know, I'll give you my personal opinion up front. I won't hide it. I'll just say very directly that it's my opinion that if there is a man who is married, he will probably say that there are some challenges to being married, to having a wife. There are some challenges. There are some difficulties that you cope with, and that if you have a second wife, it's not going to be an arithmetic progression in challenges. You're not going to have twice as many complications or challenges. It's going to be exponential in nature. And so I'll try to leave it there, and hopefully that will be adequate for any of your concerns or questions about what do I think about it. That you probably would be looking at a complexity that would be geometric, not arithmetic, and for that reason alone, although there are many others, for that reason alone, I think that you should just let the subject go. Okay, now let's start out with the translation itself. I've got a lot of words in here where I use the word, or a lot of places in here where I use the word unknown. Looking at what I wrote today, it's not as bad as it was last week. What I handed out last week, there were a lot of unknowns where I said unknown clothing and other unknown clothing, and unknown this and unknown that. I have to say that there are just simple limitations. With the Hebrew language, this archaic, old, ancient language, there's not a lot of literature that we can refer to give us an absolute definition. You know, it's not like, don't expect to have some archaeological discovery where somebody discovers a Hebrew-English dictionary that was written in the 2nd century BC. All right, we're not going to discover a library where we're going to find some stone tablet, somebody chiseled in a dictionary of this is the Hebrew word and this is the English word. We're not going to get that. So when Isaiah uses words that nobody else uses in the Scriptures, ever, that we have, or in any other books that we've got at our disposal, when those words are by themselves and they're not used anywhere else, it's virtually impossible to say that this is the definition of that word, because we don't know. We don't have that much information. So I'll tell you what I will be doing, which I haven't been able to do. I've been busy the last couple of weeks, doing other things. But what I will eventually have to do soon is I will have to go probably to the Greek Septuagint, which I was kind of hoping to avoid, but it's not going to work out that way. I'm going to have to go to the Greek Septuagint because that was a translation of the Hebrew at that time into Greek, and I will probably have to refer to those words and see how those words were used to describe these relative pieces of clothing, for example, and say that it is most likely, based on the Greek of the Septuagint at that time, it's most likely that this is the kind of clothing that was being spoken of. That it was a sash, or that it was a shawl, or that it was of this dimension, or it was of that dimension. And that's probably going to be my final report on these verses. That there's not enough information to know what the Hebrew would say, or what it means in the Hebrew. But I can say at that time, if somebody was speaking the language at that time, that they would be translating it into this way, and that's the closest that I can get to. And hopefully I'll find more in the Greek of that time period to be able to say that. That's as far as I can go. So you might wonder, well, then where do these people get these words from? Well, I don't know. Maybe they guessed. Maybe they made it up. All right, maybe they did. I don't have enough information to know. Now, you might be concerned about that, but I am not. All right? I am not concerned about that. I'm not concerned about the uncertainties, because it doesn't disturb, to me, it doesn't disturb the issues at hand. It doesn't disturb the purpose of the text. So to have some unknowns in my mind is perfectly fine, because I'm concerned about the purpose and the intent of the text more than I'm concerned about the definitions of specific words. So I can say that this is open-ended, that this requires more thought. If I can't get to it, you can do it. You don't need to wait till I do it. You can do it, and let me know what you find. Send me a paper or something, or a little essay, or just tell me. It doesn't matter. I'm just saying that this is a limit that I've reached personally, and I know where those limits are, and I'm not going to try to pretend and just come up with words and say that it means this when I don't know for sure. All right, so please consider this as, in that context. But it's perfectly fine to me because I'm looking at other things. All right, I'm looking at other things. Now, there are some references in the Scriptures to these things, and I think I mentioned last week that I was going to address those. I'm not. I'm going to skip past that. I'll write about it later because I want to get to chapter 4, verse 1. So just please understand that some of these words that he uses between verses 20, I think it's around 19, 20, let me check. Where he says from verse 16, more 17, definitely a lot in 18, 19, 20. In those areas, he's picked a few words in pairs where he uses enough words to tell me that he's partially quoting from other places in the Scriptures. All right, and I will just give you the summary of that. And that is that when he talks about certain types of garments or certain specific items, mainly the jewelry items, I'm just giving you the general perspective. When he speaks about these unique things, even though I don't know what the absolute definition of those words are, I do know that he is quoting from other places. He's quoting from two places. He's quoting with regards to the Midianites and with regards to the Philistines. There's one event, for example, when David was hiding behind some trees, and the Lord spoke to him and says, "Wait until you hear the tinkling of the anklet charms, the jewelry on the ankles." And I don't know if that's exactly what it says in the English. I just recall that, reading that in Hebrew, that he told him, wait until you hear the sound of the ankle jewelry, and that's when you go and attack. When Isaiah uses those words that correspond to those verses with regards to David attacking the Philistines, that is a way of saying that these women are like the Philistines. So I don't need to know exactly what those jewelry items are. All I need to know is that he's accusing the women of being like the Philistines. That's what's important to me, and why I feel comfortable with not knowing the absolute geometrical description of what's on the ankles. Okay? But I do know that he's making an association with these people and the Philistines, which, you know, is not a positive description. All right, it's not a positive description. With regards to the necklace that has kind of a crescent shape, I think there are a few English translations that use the word crescent shape. It's talking about the decorations that were on the camels of the Midianites. And so he's effectively saying, regardless of what the geometry is of the necklaces, right, he's making a statement that the ladies were behaving in a way that would be described as a Midianite, as someone who is not an Israelite, of someone who needs to be conquered, who needs to be, you know, eliminated in that way, because they are not considered to be legitimate members of the Israelite society, just like they would be calling them Philistines. The same attitude would be presented. So when I read through this, I'm comfortable with not knowing the geometry or the dimensions of the clothing or specifically where they were placed, because what I see is the references to other nations that to me is more important, and to me would be what they were actually hearing and why he would be using those words. Does anybody follow me? Can I get a witness? You know, if I may use that. Is that Baptist? Is that All right, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time with the details concerning these things, with the exception of one. That's in verse 24. Just because I like this, I'll mention this. In verse 24, I'm going to go down to the thought-for-thought rendition. For those of you who are not aware, I have a word-for-word and a thought-for-thought. The word-for-word is where I look at the verse and I say, okay, let's just say one word to one word, or one word to, two or three, just to give a rough sketch about what's being said. But then, because of the position of the words in the sentences, or because of the definitions of those words, I need to throw a little bit more in there to try to convey the thought, which is why I will call it a thought-for-thought translation instead of word-for-word, because I have added things in there that are not there in order to try to explain what is there. Okay? So I'll just be reading from the thought-for-thought from verse 24. And instead of a fragrance, there will be a stench. And instead of a girdle, there will be a type of rope that won't be covering as much. You know, that word for girdle is the same word that he used for Adam and Eve, that the Lord used for Adam and Eve when they put the fig leaves around them. So if you can imagine going from a skirt of fig leaves to just a rope, that would be a change. Right? It would be a change of exposure. And instead of work involving hammering out metallic objects, okay, obviously it didn't say hammering out metallic objects. It says in the word for word, I said instead of hammered work. Okay, so you can see the difference that I threw in there, hammered work. Instead of a head that is covered, you'll see in the English translations that we have, I believe it says, instead of a head that is covered, let me just read that, verse 24. In the New King James Version it says, instead of well-set hair. And I say, instead of hammered work. All right, where do I get that from? Well, it doesn't mean well-set hair. It just doesn't mean that at all. What they mean is that the head is covered in comparison with the baldness that they say afterwards, is what they're trying to say. But the word, what the word really means is that the head is covered with something that you would use in order to protect your head while you're hammering out something with metal. For those of you who've done any work with metal, you know that when you're hitting things with With this kind of labor, it's not unusual for sparks to fly or other particles to fly. You know, it'd be nice to have some eye protection. Okay, head protection, that's what he's referring to. Especially when you're dealing with fire. Let me tell you, hammering out, you know, doing blacksmithing work is quite dangerous. All right, it really is. Been a number of times I've been burned over that kind of stuff. I'm hammering something out. You know, I made brackets recently for a mirror that I hung in the bathroom, and I made a shovel before that, and so, you know, I can really have an appreciation for having your head covered when doing some, you know, some work hammering out metallic objects, especially when heat is involved. So when he says that your head is uncovered, or baldness, they translate that as baldness. What I read there is that instead of somebody doing productive labor that would require their head to be covered, their head is now uncovered because they're not doing anything anyway. They don't need the safety protection. And they decide to call it whether somebody has, you know, well-set hair or bald. Like, that really makes a difference. Well, some people it's important. But that's not. I don't see that there. I really don't. I see him using words, and that's the word that he used. He used the same word when talking about hammering out the objects for the temple in Numbers, I think it was. It is. I'll refer to the writer of Hebrews. In some place, it is written, and in another place, where he speaks about the hammering out of the candlesticks and the cherubim. It's that word. That's the word that he's using. All right, he's not talking about having somebody's hair out of place. Can you understand the difference? All right, good. So I just wanted to mention that as something that was just really obvious to me, that it's not quite what you wanted. All right, now going down to verse 25. In verse 25, we have the probable cause of why there is a lack of eligible bachelors. All right, probable cause, war. Your men will fall by the sword, and you're mighty in the war. You know, why would there be a war? I mean, what's the reason for the war, right? Why? Well, in this circumstance, you have a nation that's in decay, a nation that's breaking down. All right, and the previous description was due to the redistribution of wealth. When you have a society that moves to the model of taking stuff from those people who have it to give it to those people who do not have it, this is not a sustainable model. Eventually, you'll either run out of stuff to take from somebody, or the people who are producing just will lose their incentive to continue to produce, and then you will run out of stuff to take. It's only a matter of time, maybe a generation or two, but it will eventually break down. And so we have that kind of decay that's taking place, which is to be expected after a moral decay took place previously. That was described in chapter 1 and chapter 2. In chapter 3, we have the redistribution, the height of which I spoke about earlier, but we are now seeing the next level of destruction, which will be war. And war can take place due to there are two things that are the most common reasons as to why a war would take place when this type of breakdown happens in civilization. The first reason is because of the vulnerability of the country. When you do not have a population who are capable of taking care of themselves, but they're feeding off of each other, then they are no longer capable of defending themselves from a foreign invasion. They don't have the resources to do that. Remember what I described earlier about the people who would look to a king to supply the chariots and the weapons instead of being responsible for supplying their own chariots and their own horses. If you can recall me talking about that 6 months ago or so, where I explained that people would want to have a king so they would not have to provide for their own horses or their own chariots or their own weapons, because the king will provide those weapons for them. That's an initial description of a breakdown that takes place in this case about 300 years prior. It's several generations before where this breakdown was initiated. At this point, you'd have people who would not be able to equip or arm themselves, and the government wouldn't be able to do it either because of the breakdown that's taking place, leaving the country vulnerable to foreign invasion. A foreign invasion is perfectly reasonable because the country has resources. It has agricultural land, it has water, it has stuff. You have the copper mines down to the south at Eilat, for example, that you can go and take over. There is value in the land, even though the people are not properly utilizing it. So it's attractive, it's appealing for a civilization or a country that is not in a period of decline, but is in a period of increase, that has a need for more resources to come down and just take over. Take the resources there, kill who's ever in the way, or enslave whoever is left. And that is what they are faced with. That's what's happening. That's what's going to happen next. Right? That's what's going on. Right? This is not unusual. Babylonians are in a time of increase. They're coming down to take over the resources and redistribute the labor through slavery. That's how they're going to do it. So vulnerability can lead to war. The other thing that will lead to war, which I don't think was happening at this time, but it does happen in other civilizations, is debt. All right, it's debt. When a civilization, for example, our civilization is in this current scenario, and there's some concern as to how this will be handled, but we have a debt, for example, which is so astronomical, I think it's in the next galaxy. Right? If we were to stack $100 bills from the ground up into space, I think we would reach the next galaxy by now. Maybe $1 bills. Right? But we're getting pretty out there. And who do we owe this money to? Well, there's some questions about who we owe this money to, but there are other countries. We'll just say it this way: there are other countries who have dollars. There are other countries who have debt instruments that they have in their possession. And what that was a promise to pay. We received their products, their real items, and we gave them dollars in exchange. Well, they're going to want something for those dollars. At some point, they're going to want something for that. What we did was we gave them a promise to pay something. If you're going to trade, you have to trade in something that's real, and the dollar is not real. It's not real at all. It's pure fantasy. And so they're going to want something real for their fantasy, eventually. And if we don't pay something, if we don't give them something in exchange, gold or oil or soybeans, something, if we don't give them something, eventually they're going to have to decide. This is what the decision is going to look like. It's going to be a decision of, well, do we just go and take, what we can through war in order to pay the debt that is owed on these dollars that we're holding? Or do we just say, we'll just let it go? And those are hard decisions to make sometimes, Perhaps somebody's owed you money in the past. And how easy was that for you to make that decision to say, just don't pay me? Maybe you had the thought of invading their home and taking whatever was necessary to compensate for those, for the debt that they owe you. You may have had those thoughts. Maybe not. If you haven't, maybe because you borrow money from somebody else, and maybe they're thinking that about you. They might be entertaining those thoughts on occasion. That is another cause for war. That does inspire war just as much as the desire to take somebody's existing resources, either because of a debt that's owed or just because you want to take it. Either way, it is a cause for war. And that's what they are faced with. So because of their lifestyle of redistribution, they have broken down the society to the point where they are vulnerable for war. If they wanted to extend things a little bit, they could have then done a redistribution scheme from other people, like we have done here. And then there may be a cause for war in that sense, but I don't think that's what was going on at this time in history in Israel. 8th century BC. I don't think that's what was going on. I don't have enough information to say that that's what was taking place. I think this was just simply vulnerability due to breakdown. War will come and your men will die. And then you'll have lots of eligible ladies and few eligible men. even fewer that are rich. Maybe fewer that are good looking. All right? I mean, there's going to be some change. And so, what is the response to that? You know, what is the response? I mean, is there any indication that the people would realize that this is a problem and that there is a source of this problem? There's no indication of that at all. There's no indication of repentance. There's no indication of remorse. Instead, what we have is a description of continual decay. That even after this, there's a continual decay. Where the ladies will say, well, let's get 7 of them will band together and seize. That's the word that they use. Seize one man. That's the solution. You know, you participated, just as the guys did, you participated in the decay of the civilization, and your solution is, okay, well, we'll just all gang up together and seize a man to be our husband. All right? I mean, that is a description of continual decay. Now, certainly a cause of that can be war, and that's usually what people will emphasize. Well, the guys died. And so, this is a solution model to that effect. And the ones who survived, what do? They claim victory from war and then victory at home. Okay, that is not a good way to go. All right? Like I said, there may be some men who may assert that kind of an attitude. But that is an attitude to say victory in war, that I survived, and then victory at home because now I've got 7 wives. That is an attitude of decay, of depravity. All right? That's how I personally view it. But the emphasis in this case would be on the ladies, that the ladies will have decayed their moral standards to the point where they would be willing to seize one man and share him with another. That is a description of decay of the ladies. All right, now there is a lot more to be said about that, so let me proceed. Beginning in verse 1, this is Isaiah chapter 4, verse 1. In the thought for thought, bottom 4 sentences that I've written here, it says, "And 7 women will be courageously strong upon one man in that day, saying, we will eat our own bread and we will clothe ourselves with our own clothing. Only what your name will be called will be upon us." I know that sounds a little awkward in English. Only what your name will be called. And that's because you have to understand that you don't always do the same job. Things change in life, especially after war. You're probably discovering that the concept of a career is kind of dead now. You do something for 5 or 10 years and then you got to go do something else because what you were doing before isn't available anymore, or you can't compete with others who are coming up behind you. You got to make a change. I know in the technology industry, which I was a part of for a period of time, after a certain age, you're expected to be in management. If you don't make it to management by a certain age, you become obsolete. and it's kind of sad for those who really enjoy doing the labor. But it's a perspective within the technology industry in some circumstances, not in all circumstances, of course, but enough to at least be able to mention that as an example. That if you do not adapt and change with time and with the times, then you can become obsolete very quickly. So that's how did I get there? What your name will be called. Yeah, because what your name will be called, who you will be, what you will do, it is dynamic in many cases. It's not static, and so that's how they structured it, especially in the face of war, is to accommodate the circumstances of change. So whatever your name will be called, whatever you will do, however you will make a living, however you will have a role in our society, don't worry about that because we will provide for our own bread and our own clothing. And there are men who would say amen to that. Right? And there are women who would say amen to that. Okay? And I believe that this is evil. To say this is a statement of evil, and I'll explain that in just a moment. Before I do, let me say that yes, there are men who would say, okay, sure, just be my wife and go ahead and provide for your own food and clothing. I don't have to worry about that, and there are women who will find that appealing because there are women who want to be independent from their husband and want to be able to go and buy their own food and especially clothing without talking with their husband about those things in advance, right? I mean, when you see those $400 designer shoes, that you want to wear, you know that if you speak to your husband about this, he's going to feel uncomfortable. And so it would be better maybe to just go get your own job, earn your own money, and buy your own $400 designer shoes, right? Can you sense the problem here? The problem is a disconnect between wives and husbands. That's the nature of the problem here. This is not a good thing for a woman to be bound with a man and for her to tell him, don't worry, I'll feed myself and clothe myself. This is not a healthy thing. This is not a healthy thing at all. That's what I mean. Some men will read this and say, oh good, that makes it easier on me. No, that is not what marriage is about. But there are some men who think it is. And there are women who would say, oh yeah, let's be independent of our men and not look at them as the ones who provide for the food and for the clothing. And that to me is evil. All right, it's a statement of. This is what it looks like. It looks like two single people who are bound together with a marriage license. And that's it. Now I understand that there are consequences related to that, especially in our current society, that there are many people who have grown up that way. We've had, I think, 2 generations now, almost 3 generations in our civilization where that was the progressive thought, where that has been the progressive thought. And I think we could probably make it 1 more generation this way before the decay before there is such a breakdown that this won't survive. Okay, 1 more generation, I think would be it. That's just my opinion, of course. But we've had 2 or 3 where there's been a separation between husbands and wives to the point where you have 2 single people who are just simply living together and calling themselves married. That's what it looks like. So when people would read something like this, they would say that the women would be so desperate for men that they would be willing to provide for their own food and clothing. This is not a statement of desperation for men, in my opinion. This is a statement of how bad the women were. Not how desperate they were, but of the fact that they would not take a husband and they would not give themselves to a husband. All right? It's a statement of further decay in that sense. All right? I don't see that as a positive thing at all or as a statement of desperation. It does give the implication of desperation when they say, only what your name will be called upon us, gather together our reproach and take it from us all. That they believe that this is a solution to the desperation of having this stigma of being single. The stigma of not being married. Take this away from us. We're so desperate for this to be taken away from us that this is what we will do. I think it's a lie. All right? I think that this is a true statement that hides the fact that they don't really feel embarrassed at all. Right? That's just my opinion, of course. Please read it for yourself. Okay, but what I see here is that they would really, they're trying to hide behind that in order to assert themselves as still being independent, single people. Why? Because of the belief of redistribution. If you're bound to a husband, then you don't need to rely on the government to go take property from somebody else and give it to you because your husband then takes that role. You have to give up the right of redistribution, which I don't think people are going to give up easily. Right? You're going to see that now, too. In our civilization, you're going to see that people will not say, okay, let's give up our rights to redistribution and we'll form families and take care of ourselves. You're not going to see that happen. People will go all the way to the end, to death, saying they will die before, they will suffer under the absence of anything before they will go back to a sound family unit. They will go until there is nothing left. Only when there is nothing left and there is no alternative will wives return to their husbands as providers instead of looking to the government as being the provider through redistribution. Only when the government completely runs out of stuff to give will they then turn to their husbands. And I think we might be able to make it one more generation before we completely run out. If we're fortunate, depending upon your point of view. All right. So when they say take away our reproach of not having a husband, they still view their husbands in a way that is evil. They're not really taking a husband. Because if they were really taking a husband, they would say, I want a husband who will provide them with the food and the clothing, which is according to the law. But they're not doing that. I don't think I'm getting this across. Just for some reason, I'm just not getting it. I just don't think I'm... So I'm going to try it again. Okay, I'm going to try this again. The women go... the women say that we don't have a husband, so we don't look so good. Single women, especially as they're getting older, somebody might ask them, so why don't you have a husband? Right? So they might feel, like they're inadequate in that way. So they say, well, I'll just go get a husband so that I can have his name. That's all I want from him. Just give me your name so that I can say that I'm married. And I'll provide for my own food and clothing. Whatever I need. That is their solution. That is their solution to not having a husband, or to not having the name of a husband, or not being identified as married. That is not a marriage. Okay? When they say, take away our reproach, well, this solution of taking away the reproach is not a valid solution. So I'll focus on that rather than 7 to 1. Okay? That to me the issue is not 7 women to 1 man. To me the issue is the attitude towards the man. That the man is nothing more than a name. And perhaps you know men like that, who are married. And they would say, my wife only looks at me as just having that she just wants me for my last name so that she can go around and say she's married. And that's all I'm good for. That's all I am to her. I'm just the guy, that she says I'm married to, take me to parties and stuff, and that's it. And there are men that probably feel the same way. That there are ladies who probably feel the same way. That I'm just here because so he can say that he's married and he takes me to parties and shows me off, and that's it. Right? Of course, that's not a marriage either. But that's what they're saying. They're saying we have a problem, so we're going to solve it this way. We're going to solve it this way. We're just going to say that we're married, but we're not going to have a real marriage. We're not going to have a husband and a wife working together. We're going to have a husband doing his work, a wife doing her work, and maybe they'll share a little bit together. Which probably looks like what is his is theirs, and what's hers is hers. You're laughing because you know that's exactly how it works out. And that's dysfunctional. Okay? It's dysfunctional. It is not a marriage. And it's not, and to say that what's hers is theirs and what's his is just as dysfunctional. Alright, so going the other direction is not necessarily helping either. But that's what they're doing. You got 7 women who gang up and seize this man and say, you're only here because we want to say that we're married. Right? And for a man to say, okay, I'll concede to that, that's not a man. That's not a man. That's a wimp. That's a coward. Alright? He should say, no. No. I provide you with what you eat and what you wear, or you're not my wife. Okay? Now, look, I understand that, circumstances of life right now are different. And so I'm not saying, husbands, go home and explain this to your wife, that they have to quit their job and you have to provide them with, you decide what they wear. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying in a statement like that is that the men should have defended themselves to say to these women that if they want the man, they're going to have to get the whole man. If they want a marriage, they're going to have to get the whole marriage. Not just a part of it so that they look good. Alright? But the whole thing. That we're going to have a whole thing. And you know, believe it or not, two people working together can produce a lot more food and clothing than two people working separately. Alright? It's true. Let me give you a good example. Let's say that a guy can make $4,500 per hour. Alright? Which in today's money is a lot. Let's say he can do that. But his wife, she can make maybe $40 an hour doing work. So, what is it going to look like when the husband has to spend 2 days a week cleaning the house, mainly cleaning up after his wife, and the kids too. 2 days a week cleaning up the house, while his wife is working for $40 an hour during that time. Is that a productive use of time? Is that two people working together? It isn't, especially when she decides to blow it all on designer shoes. And then says, don't worry, sweetheart, I take care of myself. Now, you might think that that is unreal or imaginary. But it's real, all right? I mean, that really is a good description of some relationships. And I consider that to be dysfunctional. It is not an exaggeration. Perhaps because you couldn't do that much work for that many hours. So let's bring it down to 450 instead of 4,500. But it's still 10 times. Maybe it's not 100 times, but it's still 10 times. And that's reasonable in some circumstances. But do you understand the statement behind that? Is that for the pursuit, the statement behind that is that the women were so evil that they would want to have a relationship with a man on this basis. That they would view him in this way. And the man is so evil that he would take a wife into his life under this circumstance where there would be such a reduced amount of productivity of life. Which isn't measured by the money and it isn't measured by the shoes. All right? It's measured by two people working together. Two people living together. Two people participating together. The idea of the money or the shoes or the food are nothing more than measurable indicators of things. But the real value is whether people are working together, or whether they are living together, whether they are participating together or not. Alright? That's what's going on here. So this is not a statement of 7 desperate women. I don't see that. I see this as a statement of 7 dysfunctional women who found one dysfunctional guy. Who are now going to have a dysfunctional marriage. And not because of the numbers of people, but because of the way that they participate with each other. Alright, now, what happens? What happens when people live single, independent lives with another person and think that that's a relationship? What happens? You lose the value of mutual participation and the value of dependency. That a husband depends on his wife to participate in ways that she can. And the wife loses dependency on her husband to participate in the way that he can. You understand? You lose that. You lose the living. You lose the mutual dependencies. And in this case, the mutual dependencies are a good thing. They are not a bad thing. And when do you get confronted with this? You don't get confronted with this in your society, in your neighborhood, or in your job sites. You don't get confronted with this then. You get confronted with this when you get confronted with the living God. That's when this gets. That's when you get confronted with this. Because the civilizations, as they are falling into decay, will always welcome this kind of stuff. But when you get confronted with the living God, what is one of the first things that you struggle with when having a relationship with Him? Mutual dependency. It's the first thing you deal with. The bride of Christ must depend on her husband. And we won't do it. Wives won't do it. Husbands won't do it. You know, this is not gender specific at this point. All right? The dynamics can be subtly different. I'll explain that in a moment. But there is a dependency problem that we will not trust in our God. We won't depend on our God. We won't take what He has to offer. When you have a wife who will not take the food and the clothing, which is by law, Exodus chapter 21, Exodus chapter 21, verse 10. Exodus chapter 21, verse 10, that the husband is required to provide the food and the clothing and marital intimacy as well. Exodus chapter 21, verse 10, they are living in violation of that. Okay, read that verse. It refers to multiple wives as well. If a man has a wife and he takes another, he has to still provide food and clothing and marital intimacy to the other. It is in context. All right? It's in context that they are both violating this commandment. The man is, the women are, everybody's breaking the law even more than what they were before. This is not a statement of desperation. It is a statement of continual decay. Now listen, the Lord provides us with everything we need for life and godliness, right? In the spiritual context. When we are first born again by the Spirit of God, we discover that we have an inheritance in Christ according to the will of God. And all the things that He gives that we have a need for. And what do we say? What is our struggle? What happens? We say, oh no, Lord, no, I don't need that much love from you. No, I don't need that much acceptance from you. It's the same thing when the wife says to her husband, I don't need that much bread from you. I don't need that much clothing from you. I just want your name. That's the origin of this conflict that we have in receiving what our God has for us. It's the same dynamic. It shows itself here, where we won't take from the Lord what He has to offer and what He is obligated to offer, being our God, and what we are obligated to take from Him. We won't do it. Okay, it's a little bit easier to see it from the ladies because of the dependency issues there. But with the men, it's a little bit harder to spot because we're so self-sufficient, right? And we're providing for our women. We're so focused on that. We have this independent stature. We have our own struggles with going to our God and saying, I will take whatever you have to offer freely. We always want to throw in a little work. We always want to throw in a little, I'll just take half because I'll supply the other half. Or, I just need what I wasn't able to get. I was able to pay 85% of my bills. I'm not going to pray for the other 15. We tend to do that sometimes. Those are the kinds of obstacles that we deal with. But the ladies will deal with other obstacles. In this case, it's context of pride because of the societal pressure and sometimes their own desire to be independent of their husbands. All right? Especially when it comes to shoes. So that's where you find your struggle, is that you start getting confronted with what your God has to offer you, and you won't take it. You won't do it. Instead, what happens? We gang up. We get 7 other believers and gang up on God and say, Lord, we just want your name. Can you hear that? We just want your name. We just want to be Christians. But don't worry, we'll take care of ourselves. And He says, no, that's not it. That is not the relationship that He has called us to. And as guys, we'll do that in our own ways. We don't gang up on Him so much like that. Usually it is 1 to 7 instead of 7 to 1. But fractionally speaking. Okay? But it's the same problem. And this is a serious barrier that prevents people from embracing the Lord and receiving what He is offering to us for what we need in the core of our spirit, in the core of our being. But it's worse than that. All right? It's deeper than that. And I know I keep pushing the time limits, but listen to me. This is where I've been trying to reach. So I'm going to keep pushing. I've been trying to reach to this in the point of participation. Because when you do not have a wife participating with her husband in a marriage, and the husband participating with the wife in a marriage, for the purpose of working together for the productivity that could be measurable with food and clothing, but when they're not participating together, and they don't learn how to do that with each other in the physical sense, then what foundation do you have in order to learn how to experience that in a spiritual sense with the Lord? When He says, I want you to participate with me as my bride. I want you to be a participant with me. Let me give you an example. You'll find, because of the volume of labor in life, sometimes men can do more than women in certain things. I gave an example of moving dirt a few weeks ago, right? I can move about 10, how much can I move per hour? About 2 tons per hour. Well, maybe 1.5. Let's just say that I could move 2 tons per hour. If I put my wife behind the shovel, she could maybe move half a ton per hour for 1 hour per week. All right? Now, 10 years ago, I probably could move 5 tons per hour. Per day. 5 tons per day instead of 2. Okay, I can move about 2 tons per day. Let's just try to get a little more practical. So, I didn't prepare for this. You see me look at my notes? 5 tons, 2 tons. All right, as I think about it more, about 10 years ago, I'm confident I could move 5 tons, if I remember when I was shoveling, 5 tons per day. Today I could do comfortably 2 tons. 2 tons per day. My wife could probably do half a ton per day, but only 1 day a week. She's just not made for that. So what sense does it make for me to be in the kitchen washing the dishes and cooking food for the kids, and for her to be out there with a shovel? You understand? She can do what she can do. I can do what I can do. Remember what I did in that recording, what I explained in that recording on the joy of Adam, where God made the animals, brought the animals to Adam, and said, you know what, I made these. Why don't you name them? I did what I could do. I could make them. You can't do that. But you can name them. So you participate. You name the animals. Same thing. It's the exact same thing. Mutual participation on the basis of what people can do. When we engage with our God and participate with our God, it's the same thing. He will do what He can do, and we will do what we can do, and we will do together, and there will be mutual participation in a relationship. But that's because there are 2 people working together on the basis of what they can do. The Lord can walk right in to a room of people Himself, right? He can do that. And that would be impressive, wouldn't it? But the overwhelming nature of He who dwells in unapproachable light might be a little too much for some people. So He'll send you. Right? You can do what He cannot do so easily. All right? Is there any diminishment of value there? None whatsoever. Whether it's 5 tons or half a ton, the value is not measured by the tonnage. It's measured by the participation. It's not measured by the quantity or by the dollars. It's measured by the participation. Because life is living. It's not consuming and earning. It's living. That's what life is in a physical sense. In a spiritual sense, it's very similar. Life is about going through this life, participating in the work of God, which is directing people to Him. And we are allowed to be participants in that. But we won't do it because we don't want to be married to God. And we don't want to be a participant unless it's participating in the way that we would like to. Only in the big ways, not in the little ways, kind of thing. There's a lot that can be said about that. I'm just going to leave it there. That there are many reasons why people will not participate in the work of God because they don't see their participation being of the magnitude that they want it to be. Same thing in relationships in the marriage. People don't want to participate in one thing or another because they don't think it's of the magnitude that somebody else is. And that's just pride. Okay? You're forgetting about living life. And you're consumed with your own pride. And it infringes on your relationship with God. Because that's what He's called us to. He's called us to be His bride. For Him to provide, for us to take. He's called us to be a participant. For us to be His helper. But when we don't even help each other, we cannot easily be helpers in Christ. For Christ. So that's what I see in chapter 4, verse 1. Is not an issue of... Does that sound like too much of a summary? I don't see an issue of 7 ladies being desperate for a man. I really don't. I see 7 ladies being so desperate not to have a man. I see it differently, and this is why. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for this time that we could spend to review these scriptures. Lord, I do pray that in light of all that I have said, that you will find some way to speak to our hearts to make whatever adjustments, corrections are necessary, and that you'll speak to us about the relationship that we have with you, and that you will speak to us about the food that you are offering that we're not taking, and that you speak to us about the participation that you would like us to have in your work that we're not doing. And Lord, I pray that you will show us our pride when it comes to not taking what you offer, and our pride when it comes to not being involved in the way that you've called us to. I thank you for this in Jesus' name. Amen.